Hi, my name is Steve Atamian. I'm one of the co-founders and Chief Empowerment Officer of Global Brigades. And today is August 25th, 2013, and I'm going to be going over the 2013 annual budget for the organization, especially representative of North America and Europe. And this is our actual budget that we go through in the beginning of the year. And at this point, I'm actually going at the end of the year discussing how we did as it related to our budget and where we are, given that the year is winding down and we kind of can project out how many volunteers that we're going to have and everything else. So today I'm going to go over the revenues of Global Brigades and all the costs that we incur here in North America and Europe and how we make and what we do with those extra funds in the investments we make in terms of in contributions to the communities, in program investments, investments in local infrastructure, and what it takes to run a nonprofit here uh, representing North America and Europe. So first, let's go over the revenue and how we calculate revenue. Is if you aren't familiar with Global Brigades, is that nearly 95%, 99% of the funds that we have as an organization all come from students' contributions to the projects that they're participating in Ghana, Honduras, Panama, and Nicaragua. So students that are going on a water project, for instance, they go down together from their university. They fundraise together for their project. They each have a minimum contribution, as you can see here, this volunteer contribution depending on the country. Speaking of water brigades, so they each at the minimum raise $750 or so. A lot of times they contribute more funds, and that just goes directly to the water project itself for more supplies and materials and such. And so, which is extremely helpful. But for the purposes of budgeting, we just kind of budget based on that scenario where everyone is just doing the minimum. So $750, and let's take a look. So in 2012, we had we'll keep going with water brigades. We had 361 volunteers participate in that program. So we're projecting about a 14% growth for the year in this column. And this is, you'll notice that these numbers don't always line up. As you can see, medical brigades and hunters were actually anticipating less than that we had the previous year. This is because we did open up operations in Nicaragua for this year, and we knew that it was going to uh, slightly reduce the amount of students that were coming to Honduras because of that. But over time, or rather, as a collective organization, you'll see that it is about 14% growth from our low projection to what we had actual in 2012, and we had about 23% growth in the middle column and a 36% growth in the high column. Okay, so we're going to take and try to figure out how we budget. So we'll just go off of the low scenario, which is actually we're probably grew by 12% this year, which is a little bit less than our lowest case scenario. But we'll go off of this. So we'll take 404 students, and we'll times that by their contribution minus what we immediately grant out. And so what is a grant out? You'll notice these numbers, the 750 and the 600. So what we immediately grant out are the things that are essentially immediately pertinent for the brigade itself, for the brigade to happen. And a lot of the money too also to perpetuate the brigade. So that hires all of the local Honduran technicians and engineers to perpetuate the water projects. That hires all of the coordinators, the translators, materials and supplies for the projects for the 7-day to 10-day programs. It is basically all of the cost of the brigades plus the money to perpetuate it. So the difference, the 600 and 750, is the money that basically that we have from North America and Europe to administer our organization and to make additional investments in programming. And why we structure it that way is so we can come together as an association across all of the different countries, including representation from Honduras, Panama, and Ghana, in Nicaragua, to decide where those remaining funds go and what's most strategic for the organization for a particular year. So this budget is a reflection of that difference, that $150 difference, the 750 and 600. So what we do is we take 404 and we times it by 150, and we get $60,000. And then we add up this entire column to get a grand total of $1.5 million. So what this total represents is all of the programs from all of the countries, as you can see, from Panama and Ghana and Honduras and Nicaragua, all of those students times what their minimum of what they're contributing, minus what we grant out, and adding up all this together, and we have a really wide budget between $2 million and $1.5 million. And I'll show the relevance of that in a moment when I go through all this cost. But first, the most important thing for you to understand is how we generate and how we project our revenue. So we'll take that 1.552197, and it gets automatically put up to here. The two tabs are connected. So if I change one number, it reflects this. So this is the 1552 here again. And we add in our other incomes that we get, and our other program incomes that we get, and other related incomes. So the first other one that we receive is the contribution for the airline markup. So Global Brigades took in-house its own travel agency this year, and we did that to basically only mark up students about $30 per student instead of what in the past different agencies, not Fly for Good, but the ones that were in the that we had previously used in the past were marking up between $60, $80, $90 to $100. So with our partnership with Fly for Good and taking a lot of the travel in-house, we were able to mark it up only $30 and facilitate the students and to get all of the bookings under one roof, and to have all the students fundraise for not only the program in their project, but also to get there and to participate in the program in person alongside community members. So we receive those funds and everyone fundraises on empower.org or whatnot, and we receive those funds and we pay to the airlines directly for that. And because we pay directly for that, we get to use our American Express Plum Card, which gives us a 2% rebate. It's from an old product. They don't even offer 2% anymore, but they keep it for us. And we receive about $100,000 this year just from that rebate from American Express. And just because we centralized airfare, that decision to centralize airfare attributes to over almost $360,000 to our organization's budget a year, which is extremely important to our administrative costs, which you're going to find out in a moment what those are. So then we ask for everyone to automatically, the automatic 3.5% collection on donations is on empower.org. We ask that when someone donates on a credit card that they pay, ask for an additional contribution of 3.5% to waive those or to cover those. And so if you don't, then you would, there's an alternative in the United States for an e-check, an ACH payment, and it's free if you choose to do an ACH. But essentially this is the credit card fees and the empowered fees associated with that. As you'll notice, there is an empowered fee from Europe, and that is because we had previously been using Google Checkout and PayPal in Europe and in the UK. And this year, I'm happy to say you're going to be on the same system as the US and Canada, and you're going to be able to receive, you'll be all connected to the same merchant processing systems as we have, and also be able to have a variety of different payment types, not just credit card. A lot of direct payment types, bank-to-bank transactions that are very common, especially in Europe. We'll be able to account for or be able to process this coming year. General donations and matching gifts, as you'll notice, we had about $30,000 in donations and matching grants this year, and this was about $15,000 from Portland Roasting Company. Yay, Portland Roasting Company, thank you so much for that. 15K went directly to our water project, and $15,000 that we had fundraised for the student leadership conferences. We got a nice sponsorship from Kaplan and others, and we appreciate that very much. It helped us cover some of those costs. A loan repayment from Ghana is an additional source of income. We had about $42,000 of that being repaid back. This is basically the amount of money that we had previously in years past contributed toward the construction and the land purchases of our own compound in Ghana. And why it's in a form of a loan instead of a form of form of a donation is because, frankly, our executive directors in Honduras and Panama and Ghana, especially, are very always trying to keep down the cost of the brigades and always trying to find ways to reduce costs. And so when we have to pay a vendor for a hotel or for other types of accommodations, it gets very pricey. So they wanted to build their own facilities, which makes perfect sense. It makes logistics 1,000 times easier for them to run our own compounds. But because this money is coming from the student contributions from years past and even this year, we want it to receive that money back eventually so they can go to the ultimate goal, which is to go towards sustainable exits and go towards programming and toward the water and the health programs and the microfinance programs that we have in our community. So we do ask, and because they are becoming more efficient with those investments, in compounds and whatnot, they're able to pay back in the form of loan, and it's not hurting the the in-country nonprofit. Med donations from groups. This amount actually is significantly higher than $150,000, but essentially it is the amount that the medical brigaders fundraise on top of their traditional contribution to make sure that they have enough medicine for the brigade itself. And that money just kind of comes in and comes out. It goes directly out to the in-country entity or to the med grant suppliers that we have working with here in North America and Europe. Our retained earnings is essentially the money that we previously had from years past, all added up. We won't know that exact number until the end of this year, obviously, but this is a projection of where we were from the audits from 2012, which have just finished, are finishing. The 2012 audits are just finishing now, and the 2013 audits obviously won't happen for another few months. But that's a rough estimate of where we think we are from years past. As you can see, rather, we try to run as close to breaking even as possible. I mean, it's literally, and put it in context, it's in total a 13 to $15 million, $13 to $17 million budget every year, and so to come within $20,000-$30,000 of breaking even is quite a goal, and something we've been very good about over the course of the years because of how we do extra contributions at the end of the year, or how we donate extra contributions at the end of the year. So moving on, that's all of our admin, that's all of our contributions. So we can have a range between $2,400,000 and $2,900,000, depending on the success of how many students essentially we have. And so now let's get into the administrative costs. So admin costs. We have about 11 full-time employees that are in North America and one in Honduras. And these people I should say that half of these people do work on programming. There's only, from an administrative side, we have a legal officer, 2 accountants, one accountant, our operations officer, and I mean that's essentially and a little bit of marketing, but rarely everybody else is working for the projects and programs and are working with the in-country teams. But for the sake of this budget, we consider all of our North American employees and European employees that serve North America and Europe, all of those people as salaries and independent contractors. And as you can see, it's about $486,000 this year. Well, it is $486,500 this year. And it's super efficient because why is it as low as it is for 11 employees? Well, first, and for all of North America and Europe, well, because it's no one's making 6-figure incomes, clearly. A lot of people, including all the founders, have taken, some of which came from being a doctor or being a consultant full-time or with working for one of the larger firms to do Global Brigades. And it's because we either founded the organization or we're extremely passionate about it. And so we don't compensate at market rates, but we believe in what we're doing and live within those means to perpetuate this. But where I was going with that and why we're able to just have, for all of North America and Europe, only really 10, 11 employees is because we have what we call our central association, as I mentioned. And those team members, including, the legal officers and programming people, serve not only the United States, but also Canada, UK, Ireland, Germany, Switzerland. The entire North American European operations come together at the association level. And from there, we can store administrative costs that serve each of those countries. Otherwise, we would have to have an executive director for UK and Ireland, and we'd have to have separate accounting teams and separate legal teams and all of those things. And so it's been a huge advantage for us not to do that and to organize the way we have, to centralize administrative costs in the way we have, especially in the United States, whereas most nonprofits our size that are bringing, that are on 400, have 400 or 500 chapters in North America, Europe, or sorry, just even in the United States. Just look at the states. There's well over 300 chapters. In traditional nonprofits, because they don't have the technology or aren't backed by something like Empower.org, they each have their own websites, their own bank accounts, their own administrative, and oftentimes they'll even set up their own nonprofit, their own 501c3. And so you'd have the Global Brigades of LA and the Global Brigades of New York and the Global Brigades of Seattle, and they would be legally separate 501c3 nonprofits, each with their own executive directors, each with their own administrative and accounting procedures and insurance. But because we have Empowered and we're all able to fundraise and move on the same platform, we can just create basically one large account, and pay for the administrative costs across all of the country, or countries in this case. So it's a huge, huge advantage of Global Brigades that often gets overlooked, and is really why we're able to keep costs as low as we have. So employment taxes are pretty straightforward. Stipends, this is the $250,000. These are about 30 foreign North American Europeans that were working in country in Honduras, Panama, Ghana, Nicaragua, that are working towards the program development, either mentoring and working with club presidents or working alongside programming teams to improve programs. So these are categorized as administrative costs, but any other organization really refer to these as programming related. They are program costs. Those people are like the social worker of Global Brigade, so to speak, that are coming from North America and Europe. But for the purposes of this budget, and just to be completely as conservative as possible, we're considering any North American and European that is living and working for our organization at any capacity as administrative costs. It's not many people would define it that way, but we're going to show it in the most blunt and broad term as possible to make a point. So we have travel and other tech expenses. This is basically all the travel expenses and technology costs and miscellaneous expenses that each of those 11 employees have, and some of the stipends and some of the people working in country have. This is traveling out for exchanges, conferences, going in country to make visitations. It just adds up to that. We have the contingency legal expenses, self-explanatory. We have a full-time legal officer, as I mentioned, and sometimes there's some contracts or partnerships that we need to have some outside guidance on and bring in. We usually don't spend that full $15K, but it's there for contingency. Empower.org, as I mentioned, the importance of that a moment ago. You see we spend about $146,000 a year on Empowered. It counts for 2 developers that are in Argentina, 1 QA person in Pakistan, 1 marketing person, and 1 project manager. So that's the $146,000 for Empowered. This year, Empowered is getting completely integrated into globalbrigades.org, which is super exciting. If you haven't already, go to globalbrigades.org and click on chapters, and you'll notice and be able to drill down, and you'll see all of the old stuff that was on Empowered and all of the brigades and the volunteers and the members. It's all integrated into our website now, and so it's something that we hope that will, in a smooth transition, but B, you guys, when you're starting to brigade and you're starting to fundraise, you'll just go and create all the pages on the Global Brigade site, and it's all powered by Empowered, so to speak, and it's all the same database, but it's a huge shift for us because it will now show the context when someone is donating and to support one of your projects. They're going to see it in the context of Global Brigades and all the other work that we're doing, and not just the brigade itself. So it's a really big shift. It will break down a lot of the confusion that may have been happening with what is Empower.org and what's Global Brigades, and really just to push everything on the Global Brigades website. Marketing and conferences. So we spent about $57,000. We're supporting the Ohio State Alleviating Poverty Conference again this year, or we did that this year. We have Azima, who's one of our researchers in Pakistan. We have our videographers that are living in country. Various web and design tools. Don Osborne in Quarta is one of our consultants that have been helping us grow over the last several years. Actually from the beginning. Some graphic designers, and Christina our social media person that's also living in Honduras. So this year we also brought on a grant writer and a development consulting. These are people that are going to hopefully bring us a lot more money than that $30,000 that we had previously only got this year. But the idea again is that we start bringing in more funds outside of the students and the volunteer contributions to go towards the community projects year round and really support those and accelerate them more than anything else. It's a really neat opportunity for Global Brigades because we have, as you can see, our administrative costs and our on-the-ground teams covered by just the students and volunteers participating and contributing to brigades. So any additional dollar we get from a grant or what have you can go directly into those community projects, which is something that very few, I should say, other organizations can offer a donor. So that will allow us to accelerate out of and sustainably exit more communities, and hopefully, something that we can really grow this coming year. So we have next line item is insurance. Insurance for our volunteers, our board, and others. So it's a big line item. It's almost $100,000, but this is an extremely important line item. It's when you get sick and you need to go to the hospital or something may happen in country and you may need to get medically evacuated, or you may need to just get to that hospital to be hospitalized in country for whatever reason. Fortunately, it's those kinds of instances are few and far between, but we have to have the insurance for if and when it ever happens. So that costs us a significant amount. It also costs us a significant amount to be insured for just general liability insurance for the organization. Why do we have to spend $100,000 in insurance? Well, I just mentioned that, but also so that it protects the leaders of the organization that are putting their names on it. The board of directors are essentially taking liability for all of your actions. Otherwise, if we could have set up the organization without a lot of these administrative costs and without insurance. But then it would be just these, sporadic groups of students coming down and paying directly down to Honduras or Panama or Ghana. The problem with that model, and we did that for several years when we were just starting out, the problem is liability. It exposes the club presidents to a liability that they shouldn't have to have. And we form our national organization and to be able to take on that liability and be able to be that resource to the universities who are basically asking for it. The universities really almost require that we register and we have our own insurance policies and all those things. So it's a necessary evil, so to speak, but it also helps us professionalize and has helped us grow over the years as well. Another thing with this is by forming our organization or an entity in the United States or in Canada and Germany is that we have to get audited. So this is basically a third party that comes in and says, yes, you are spending the money the way you're sending your money, basically verifying this budget. And this is our fourth audit that that we're going through right now. Every year, any nonprofit that exceeds $2 million in revenue in California, that's where we're registered, has to get an audit. And so we've been doing audits again for the last 4 years, have passed each one of them. And it's again something for accountability for the public to know that we are being financially prudent and we're transparent. The audited financial statements are posted on our website as well in the About Us section, and then in the About Us section. So board meetings is about $20,000. Board meetings about $20,000 a year. This is for basically to help all of the North American European entities hold board meetings. I don't think we've ever spent $20,000, but it also flies up a lot of the people from Central America and Ghana so that they can present to the boards to give them updates. Most of it is travel costs for that, and essentially it keeps every year we do one virtual meeting to save money and then one in-person meeting for the association, and then there's some separate ones that the different countries have as well. Banking fees, straightforward. The merchant expenses, this is the credit card fees that I previously talked about. The 3.5% and the 1.9%. The 1.9% is essentially what the credit card companies are charging us. Why we charge the 3.5% is to have that 0.6 margin. It's for two things. One, to cover Empower.org, but two is to also because we don't charge for the ACH payments, and they do actually have a little bit of a cost. We try to offset that by asking for 3.5% 2% from the credit card fees. But it's merchant expenses, and we can't get away from not having credit card fees. So the neat thing here is you'll see those are all of our administrative costs that we have covered. It's about $1.3 million. You saw how fast it went. But essentially, without those administrative costs, we wouldn't have a U.S. entity, we wouldn't have a Canadian entity, we wouldn't have all of our North American, European support, and we wouldn't be able to offer tax receipts to our donors, and we wouldn't be able to be liable for the students and be accountable to the universities and our stakeholders. So again, a necessary evil, and something that we are proud of also, because we, as you'll notice, it is below 10%. Our administrative costs, including half of which I mentioned are programming related, we're still 10% below of when you look at our admin costs as a percentage of our revenue. So our admin costs, like I said, 1.3 million. If our total revenue was that 13.8 million to 14 million, that's how we get that number. Again, if you also consider this, if you take out the stipends, which are programming, you have half the salaries of those independent or of the full-time people, and you consider that our merchant expenses were almost 2% of that number. It's really like 3 to 4%. How if a traditional nonprofit, if they were looking at our budget and they were dealing with the numbers we were dealing with, would probably only say that we had admin costs of 2 to 3% of our total budget. So it's something that we're extremely proud of, and it has been given a lot of thought about of how to reduce as much as possible, so that obviously the money that is being raised for the projects go to the projects. It's that straightforward. We're all extremely passionate about that, and why for 4 years we, the founders were working full time and volunteering for Global Brigades on the side. We didn't want to come on, and we were reluctant to start setting up these entities because we knew the costs associated with it. But we have, and we made that decision as a team, and it's created a lot more professionalism and allowed us to grow a lot more. So no regrets. One thing I would want to share, though, that is exciting about this, to say that there almost is a little bit of a light out of the tunnel out of these administrative costs, is you'll notice that our income from airlines and our American Express rewards was about $350,000. That almost covers all of our salaries and independent contractors. It's 3/4 of the way there for covering all of our salaries and administrative costs for all of North America and Europe, just our travel agency side. And the way that that's structured, and this might be a little bit too detailed, but this year we set up a public benefit corporation, which is a for-profit company based in California. It's called Global Brigades Ventures. And basically, the idea of Global Brigades Ventures is to own a little bit unrelated projects or income sources like travel, like Empower.org, like other investments that we'd make in other like-minded organizations. And we put that in a social investment fund so that we would be able to grow the worth of that company and become more profitable, so that we can gradually start pulling all of the administrative costs from Global Brigades nonprofit into the for-profit. And so that's the idea of that. And we're, as you can see, we're getting really close to being to get almost, obviously we're close to getting our salaries and independent contractors all there. But overall, we'd like to get almost all of these costs put in there as well. The goal is in the next 3 years is that Empowered and our travel agencies are paying for all of the administrative costs of the nonprofit organization, which again is a very unique model. Maybe it's taking the idea of administrative costs overboard, but we really are passionate about it, and we're so close to being there, and we're almost there, and we'd like to continue up that mountain. Okay, so then we have some program costs. So program costs and program investments are the next two things I'm going to go over. The program costs we have are our local exchanges. These are when university students are getting together regionally. We have our Student Leadership Conference, which we just had in Berkeley. It was awesome experience. We did get some of the sponsors for this project, so it didn't cost us a full $50K, but almost. In the future, we hope to get all of those costs taken care of. Program scholarships are just essentially the program scholarships we give for exceptional club presidents and university leaders for leading brigades throughout the year, and those are the associated costs for those that we still have to grant out or deduct from our budget, because the revenue doesn't include those club presidents. So then we're left with a net income basically of between 1.5 or 1.6 and $1 million. So if we were a for-profit company, this would basically go to shareholders or people that own the organization. But is Global Brigades a for-profit? No. It's a non-profit organization. So we reinvest that back into programming and back into the communities. So and we invested in the infrastructure. So the first program or infrastructural investment that we made this year, as I mentioned, was the travel agency purchase. This one was the med donation grants. So that's really more programming related or medical related specifically. That was the 150. We actually had a lot more than 150K, but again, that was the same number as this one up here. So we just kind of deducted it so that it wouldn't affect our bottom line, or so that it was accounted for. The investments in our compounds. So as you saw, we did the Ghana one earlier this year. This one's going to be done by January. It's almost finished now, actually. The Panama one is not. The reason why we haven't collected the loan payments back from that is because because we haven't made that contribution yet. Actually, we're doing that in the next month so that their compound is ready before January. But we haven't collected interest payments back on that because, again, we haven't issued the grant yet or the loan yet. Nicaragua infrastructure. To get started in Nicaragua, it required about $30,000 for trucks and different setting up the offices and everything else, investing in some full-time employees there. We had a fire incident in Ghana. Obviously, this is clearly a new item. It was not something that we had budgeted for previously, but an accident that we had there with an intern and just a terrible accident that burnt down part of the office and house that they were staying in. Complete accident, but something that we had to account for. Spent for a bus in Ghana, it's $36,000 for a new bus, which is Asamoah can't wait for, because right now we're spending $200 to $300 a day on a bus, and so by having our own, we'll be able to repay that back very quickly. Our contributions to youth, women in education and development. So the first one, it was an investment that we made through Global Brigades Ventures in an organization called MedTools, later called Proa Medical. They create appropriate medical devices for women in the developing world, and so that was like the first investment that we made in Global Brigades Ventures, and was seed funded by the U.S. entity. And we don't intend to do a lot of these, but just to start building the portfolio and start building the infrastructure Global Brigades Ventures, we wanted to do something, and it was also a support of a longtime supporter of Global Brigades, not financially, but through mentorship. That we were able to, the founder of that we wanted to support his initiative. It aligned it really well to our overall objectives, and we know that there will be some really good returns for that in the future as well. Education scholarships for students and from the communities. This is a very unfortunate line item because we didn't actually receive any grants for that. We tried to this year. It is not to say that we didn't give money to students from Honduras and Panama and Ghana. It's quite the contrary, actually. In Honduras, particularly, I believe they had 4 or 5 young women that we pay for their college, all through all from the support from the stores and the tiendas that we operate at the compounds in Honduras. But we wanted to do more, but we just didn't get the funds for that this year. Florasul, and later is going to be the clinic. So I have some huge news for you guys. $60,000 this year went to Florasul, which is a boarding school in support of Sociedad Amigos de los Niños. It's a way we support education, and we had support education for the last 4 years. But this year we're going to be transferring this budget to actually being able to operate our own hospital in Honduras, and it's central to the region that we work in to provide year-round care, obviously, to all those within those communities, especially for urgent care, and also really be able to keep that really existing presence on the ground for the people that have needs beyond the scope of the medical brigade. So this year we're going to be dabbling in the support of the operations of this hospital, and we're funding it, obviously, but then also we're helping administer it alongside Sociedad Amigos de los Niños. So it's a really neat opportunity for recent grads or people going in the medical profession who later become doctors and want to get back involved with Global Brigades. We will now have that infrastructure for you. And if it goes well, we will be able to obviously set those similar hospitals up in Panama and Ghana as necessary. Otherwise, we'll continue working alongside the government in those clinics and hospitals in those countries, which are in a little bit better of a shape than the ones that we're in the region that we're working in Honduras. Lastly, these are our contributions to communities in sustainable exits. So the water exit fund, we had that 15K from the Portland Roasting Company, as I mentioned before. We weren't able to secure a grant for the microfinance exit fund. We thought we were in the beginning of the year, but it doesn't look like we were. But I have good news about that later. But we weren't able to do that this year. We have about $15,000 for patient referral systems. This number is actually much higher. It's the money that students will have fundraised extra when they see a patient that has needs beyond the beyond the scope of the medical brigade, and they are able to fundraise for them so that they can get their surgery or whatever it may be. And so that money gets sent down to Honduras or Panama or Ghana for that. And so lastly, or second to lastly, we have our community health worker investments. So we contributed another $15,000 from North America and Europe to support the community health worker system that we have in Honduras and starting those in Panama and Ghana. And what these women do is they work between the brigades to really provide primary care in those communities. We have a system that trains them and then we give them cell phones and access to our doctors to ask questions. A lot more money than $15,000 goes into this. This is just surplus funds. So of the $600 or the $750 contributions that we raise and then we grant out, a lot of that money goes into these CHW programs as well. It's a lot of the money is kind of behind the scenes of that, right? It's like you wouldn't even have thought that you're contributing these funds, and it goes towards initiatives like that. So hopefully this budget kind of highlights some of those things that you may not be able to see to really see all of the things that are happening within Global Brigades in our entire budget. And then last on the budget itself is the data informatics system. So we spent about $10,000 this year on trying to consolidate all of our patient records. And we're going to spend a little bit more than that this next year to make sure that all of them are consolidated and that we have full-time programmers on the ground that are local that can maintain those databases and that make sure that all of the data that were the patient records that we're getting are being consolidated and used for reports and data assessment in the communities. So that's an exciting initiative. And so in the end, you'll see that we spent all of that, and then we basically have this range of amounts that we have at the end of the year. And so we couldn't budget anything else because we didn't want to get too far down. So we gave ourselves a little bit of a cushion of $50,000. So what ended up happening is so we have this best case scenario of 543 and our worst case scenario of 50. Actually, this year we only probably grew by more like 12 to 11%, so we're definitely more on this side of the budget. However, because students were able to fundraise more than just the minimal contribution, we did have reserve funds. So we don't think we're going to hit this mark, but because students were able to, we're going to be able to give another $30,000 to the microfinance brigades or the microfinance projects to capitalize the community banks, and another $10,000 to finish a well in a community so we can begin our holistic model in a community. So let me talk about these two really important initiatives first. So it was recently approved at the last board meeting that any end of year funds, essentially like this, can go towards one of two things, as we explained: water and microfinance. Why water and microfinance? Well, anything else like we're going to do, like medical and things like that in the clinic and hospitals, we'll budget accordingly. We'll put that in the budget itself. But we won't know like end of year budget and end of year surplus funds. But why water? Water obviously is a cornerstone of all of our other public health and other related programs. If they don't have water in their homes, we can't do some of the projects. So what we're doing with water is we will build wells and or accelerate the speed of the existing gravity systems that we do. So we do usually two types of water systems in Honduras particularly. We do gravity systems. So it's building a dam from the water source with local engineers, and students come in, they pipe the water down. And so with extra funds, we can finish those projects faster, or we can build a well in a community that doesn't have access to that watershed to build a dam. We can actually just build a well, and then students can come and distribute the water to the families' homes, and a water brigade is more conducive for that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do a water brigade in that community, because building a well is not something that is conducive for students to participate in. It's a tractor coming in and big machinery. It's not, building and digging and doing a gravity system. So this allows us to work in communities that we're currently doing medical brigades in, and then have done medical brigades in for the last 10 years, but wouldn't have access to that water system. And then we have microfinance brigades. So microfinance brigades, why that's so important is that it basically is capitalizing the community banks to a point where, and let me step back for a second. What it's doing is, in each of our communities, in our holistic communities that we work in, we set up community-owned banks. And these community-owned banks are owned by the community, and we do capacity building with them, and we identify those leaders to operate and maintain these funds. And we put money into the funds. We don't ask for it back. We just put it into there so that they can lend to family members, and families can set up savings accounts, and they can create and improve their businesses. Or if they need to take a loan out for a latrine or a public health project, they can just do it on their own. They don't need necessarily the volunteer or the brigade to come down. So ideally, we're able to capitalize the community banks enough so that we can leave a community completely, and they have enough resources to perpetuate and to do all of the projects without the students there. And between the brigades, or when the brigades are finished. And so that really is what our sustainable exit strategy is. Our sustainable exit means that we have met with the community, we've developed a plan, we've mobilized them, we've set up committees, we've identified what our goals are for medical, for businesses, or for their economics, and for their public health. What their home infrastructure is. We do the brigades to initiate and do a lot of our on-the-ground technicians do a lot of capacity building to improve what they're able to take on and to perpetuate when we're not there and the students aren't there. And we get it to the point where they don't even need to have the brigades anymore. It's just the relationship between those community members and our local on-the-ground technicians and professionals to perpetuate those projects when the students aren't there. But the missing piece of that is the capital that they would need, the money that they need to perpetuate those things. And that's how we set these parameters around how much does each community bank really need in it to be able to sustain itself without the brigades. And so at the $30,000-$40,000 mark, we should be able to get that next bank completely sustainable, and we can start moving on. So unfortunately, we're not at the $150,000 to $250,000 mark. Next year, we're hoping that we are. We are getting closer and closer to that. This is just based on number of volunteers. So I want to do two things right now. I want to demonstrate that we would have had almost over $300,000 for these water projects and these community banks if we had each group of brigades would have brought 3 more students per brigade. And we would have had $540,000 if each group would have brought down 6 more students. So how is that calculated? Basically, the only difference between this number, 8,542, and this number, 9,873, is 3 students per brigade. That gets us to our middle scenario. That would have gotten us this year over $300,000 for sustainable exits. It's a little. I hope it's nothing but motivating. It gets us up in the morning. It makes us want to pursue and get more and more students involved because we know the impact that we can make with it. So one other thing that I'm going to do, the last thing I'm going to do, is demonstrate another thing. Sometimes students will ask, well, should we lower in-country costs or in-country contributions? Well, we ask the students to contribute and to participate and for the projects. And so let's take a look at what happens when we just lower. We ask, instead of asking for 750, and again, a lot of people raise more, but to be frank, a lot of people just raise the minimum contribution of what we ask. But let's say that we ask for only $50 less for our Honduran operations. So let's change the cost of all of the suggested contribution for all of our Honduran brigades from $750 to $700, and let's see how that affects the budget. There you go. Instead of being up $50,000 and having money for sustainable exits, we are now down $150,000 for sustainable exits. I'll let that resonate. So that's based on that. The campus chair people have decided, obviously, it's not worth it, so that we can keep the $51,000 extra for the sustainable exits, and we have that. Who are the campus chair people? Well, the campus chair people are the people that are voting on this budget. They're the people that in a month from now will get their 2014 budget, and they will go over the line items with me to approve them for the upcoming year. There are student leaders that are on each of the university campuses that have asked for a campus or that have requested a campus chairperson. They are students. They are nominated and elected by the other disciplines on campus. So if you don't have a campus chairperson on your campus, we strongly recommend you do, because it's an awesome leadership opportunity for that student, and it's a great way to create and represent the holistic model on that campus. So their job is to corral the different brigades, get the medical brigades and business brigades talking, and have a community of Global Brigade students on campus, and to help prepare them for the brigades and be a resource to them, between them and the national or international organization. They also get to vote on things like the budget and any strategic decision that we make. So, for instance, and oftentimes it's them proposing the strategic decision. So, for instance, this year we are going to make some changes to our business and microfinance program, where our business and microfinance program will now be offered in each of the countries that we work in Honduras and Panama and Ghana. And we're further distinguishing the two, between microfinance really focusing on savings and loan, and business really supporting and doing more consulting projects with microenterprises. And so it was a big strategic decision to do that. And so the campus chair people vote on that, and they say, yeah, this is something that makes sense. That distinction makes sense. Let's do that. So programming decisions and overall budget is all dictated and controlled by them. It's just one example of how Global Brigades is a student-led movement, but really it is your organization. If I come away with anything out of this budget, it's to show and demonstrate that this isn't Steve Atamian's budget. This isn't Global Brigade Association budget. This is your budget. This is the student movement's budget. This is your contribution to the organization, to the projects that are happening. Without your contribution, without you going on these brigades, without you organizing on campus and making those donations and contributions from your friends and family, this budget does not exist. Global Brigades is not getting money from USAID in huge amounts of money. We're not getting a bunch of grants from Gates Foundation or whoever else to support these projects. All of the work that we're doing, all of the water projects that we've done, all of the banks that we've helped create, the community-owned banks that we've created, all the public health projects we've done, the hundreds, if not thousands, of homes that have health infrastructure are all because of you. All the several 100,000, almost or approaching 1 million patients this coming year, of all the people that patient consultations, all because of the students that are taking this initiative, volunteering, fundraising, and doing this. This is your budget. This is your organization. I'm very humbled to be in front of you and give you this presentation today, and I thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, you can email me directly at steve@globalbrigades.org. That's steve@globalbrigades.org. Thank you so much.